Hello mate, welcome back to the channel. So today is part 3 of the Delve 2.0 reimagining series that we're doing. We've got one more part after this where we're going to be taking a look at crafting, but for this one we're looking at bossing. And we know that bossing is hugely important for the design philosophy going into PoE 2. They've ramped up the quality of bosses to the nth degree. Basically every boss in the game is almost as good as, you know, the pinnacle bosses in PoE 1. So today we're going to be looking at some new encounter designs, some rewards, as well as a way of experiencing some dungeon-like longer form content in reworked Citadels. All of that culminating in a look at a pinnacle boss encounter with Uber Aul. Let's get into it. Okay, here we are with our first boss design, and that is the Brood Devourer. So I imagine most of you have been keeping a close eye on PoE over the last few years, and you will have seen the Devourer fight in Act 1 of the campaign in PoE 2. The idea here is that this is essentially like a mother brood devourer, perhaps that spawned that devourer in the first place. This is like a Uber Devourer kind of fight, I guess you could call it that. And the player will stumble across this huge boss at different points as they go through their delve encounters. Now, what is the arena like? What does the encounter sort of consist of? Okay, so the arena essentially is a very large, dark cavern. And the idea is that the camera would pull out slightly to actually increase the scale of the scene and show the size of this huge monstrosity. But like we said, it's very dark in there. And so the main source of light is going to come from your cart that is with you the entire time. And there's different things that will happen to that light and cart as you go through the fight. Around the arena, there are lots of eggs that contain these larval devourers, and they'll periodically spawn, hatch, and they will be fighting you as adds. So again, the concept here is that this is one of the brood devourers. They're the ones that are hatching all of these devourers that we encounter, making it to the surface, but this giant devourer is buried deep inside the delving mines. So for each of these, I have laid out some mechanics, some fun ideas of how I imagine this encounter going. So the first one is cart swallow. So the devourer swallows the cart, and parts of its body become illuminated from within. The player then has to follow the light of the cart from inside the boss, and once the boss reaches a certain life threshold, they will charge a powerful attack. The player then has to stand by the part of the body where the cart is in, and at the last second dodge the beam so that the devourer damages its own body, cutting like an incision and then freeing the cart out of its own body. So this is a sort of no damage 100% mechanic sort of section of this fight. I think that stuff is just, you know, much more interesting in PoE 2 with things like dodge roll that we have available. Okay, another phase, body surf. The devourer will spew acid and fill the floor, and the player then has to walk on top of moving parts of the body to avoid the degen. So maybe if your, you know, chaos resistance is really high, you can stand in this and you've got good regeneration and stuff like that. Maybe this isn't a phase which entirely affects you. But for a lot of players, they're going to want to stand on top of the snaking body of the devourer during this section, and perhaps this is where adds are coming in. You've got these larval devourers that are like snakes kind of working on their way through the acid, and you're fighting them off as they jump over onto the body with you. And then final phase to talk about is death now. So roughly 10% life, the boss lets out a scream that begins to drop staglamites from the cavern roof. So the player has to avoid these staglamites as they're coming down, but they're also going to be hitting the boss. And so you've got this consistent DPS that's happening against the boss, and you can do in little bits in windows where you can get extras in, but your main focus is going to be avoiding these large rocks that are falling down. And then eventually when the boss hits 0, one of the large staglamites will hit the boss's head, impale it, and then crush it to the ground, and that'll be like the death animation. I think that's just a fun way to add a bit of cinematic ending to this specific boss fight. Alright, next up we've got the Shatterhulk. So this giant cuddly looking guy right here. It was like almost Pixar like this design here. This one actually took ages to put together because I had to generate tons and tons of different things. It couldn't quite get something that felt unique and interesting. Kind of kept making a big bull. But yeah, the idea here is kind of like about reimagining what a Minotaur maze-like fight could be inside Delve. So, the Shatterhulk is a Minotaur-like creature created and tasked with stopping unwanted visitors to the deeper depths of mines by the Crystal King himself, hence the kind of crystalline qualities. It is empowered by Azurite that becomes embedded in his thick hide. The arena. So the arena takes place over a large maze that the players must make their way through within stages, in which the arena opens up and the players engage the beast. Here's the different mechanics as I imagined it. Okay, so starting with entering the maze, this is kind of chronological. The encounter begins at the beginning of a maze and hearing the beast roar out as you enter. The Hulk will smash through the maze walls, creating a small arena to begin fighting. So you fight this initial phase at the entrance of the maze, and you get the boss to around 2/3 of their health. And then once you've done that, they'll disappear, and you must then enter the rest of the maze to find an exit to the maze. Whilst you're inside the maze, the beast will periodically charge down the passageways at you, and the player must dodge roll under its charge or make it around the corner. I've put this happens twice, but you know, maybe the longer you're in the maze, the more it happens. I think that could be dynamic and interesting. Eventually, you'll make it out of the maze into another arena where you will then fight the rest of the Shatterhulk. And here's an example of one of the skills that they might have. The Hulk can charge into walls and release enemies through the cracks. The same charge, however, can kill the adds in the encounters. So you can imagine him with his big tusks, like, you know, putting his head down, charging into the wall. Any adds that are in his way, you know, he's not the smartest guy, are going to get pretty much wiped out immediately. So you can use the boss against himself, but then when he hits the wall, he's going to shatter some kind of fossilized crystals and stuff and release more of these like azurite themed adds. Just as a quick note here, I was thinking about what kind of unique rewards you could get from this type of boss, and I thought one thing that would be awesome is like a large, you know, two-handed mace that's carved from the tip. No. Wait. Of one of the Shatterhulk's horns. He's got these kind of crystallized, icy sort of tips to his horns. I thought that could be fun. And then maybe like a focus that's made from the single eye, you know, the cyclopean eye of the Shatterhulk. And maybe, you know, it's like a sort of mage's focus that you have and you sort of have imbued in some way that maybe has some, you know, different unique effects based on the role you get or something. Alright, now let's talk about gold drakes. So there are various different coloured drakes that themselves have delved deep into the mines, following the scent of rich gold ore veins beneath the earth. Each of the drakes offers different abilities and rewards. Okay, so let's talk about the arena first off. Right, so first off, let's imagine the arena. You're going into a cavern that has all these golden ore veins around the edge, and scattered around the cavern there are all of these exiles frozen in gold. And at the end, you will see the drake, and you don't know what color it's going to be until you get into the boss fight itself. So let's talk about the mechanics. The first phase of the fight, the drake will mainly be using physical attacks like claws, bites, and tail whips, smashing and knocking over the various golden statues as you both fight. You can use the golden statues to reduce the damage and momentum of some of these swipes. So if you imagine the tails whipping around, and if you stood behind one of the statues, then by the time it would hit you, it would essentially do like 50% less damage as some of the momentum's been taken out. Then into phase 2. So once you hit 2/3 health bar, then the drake recognizes you as a threat and begins to use their breath weapon. So the breath weapon is based on the color of the drake. So that would be, you know, like chaos damage, cold, fire, lightning, depending on the different colors. And the drake's breath weapon can melt the golden statues and the gold ore veins around the edge of the arena, creating liquid golden pools. If the player stands in these golden pools too long, they will get a debuff, which works similarly to the drowning orbs in the Eater of Worlds fight in PoE 1, where you will essentially get petrified and turn into solid gold if you stay them, and you will be dead. So around the arena, there's going to be small pools, and on the edges, there'll be like a lake, an underground lake, and players will be able to run in here and it will cool down and make all the gold brittle and break that debuff off of them, which is kind of fun. In phase 3, which will be the last third of the drake's life, they'll start using different winged attacks, things like using their wings to actually swipe at you, lifting off, pushing you back, but also doing these kind of like glidey small flights where they'll do their breath weapon or try and swipe at you and stuff like that. And now the reward. So obviously, what do you get for killing a gold drake? You get a ton of gold from their horde. So you're just going to get I've put ungodly amount of gold from fighting these. You know, I'm talking, I don't know, in PoE 1 times, maybe get 200,000 gold or something, 300,000 gold from killing one of these drakes. And then also, I thought there could be a fun, like, unique item, which is essentially using the drake scales. You get a different variation of a pair of gloves, which have a really good rarity or some kind of item rarity bonus to them. But you get different versions of them based on the different drake that you were fighting that could offer maybe some extra damage or you know, percentage of item rarity converted to, you know, damage gained as this element, or, you know, chaos or something like that. It would also be cool to have like a physical drake. So I imagine 5 of these. You've got cold, lightning, fire, chaos, and then physical. You know, some of this a lot more brutish. Maybe the physical one doesn't even have wings, you know, it's just like a more of a rhino or something, or these little baby wings. All right, now let's talk about the abyssal liches. Now we're getting into the really good stuff, more of the kind of difficult, challenging bosses, you know, that would be available to us that would scale quite hard into endgame. Before we get into all, it's important to talk about the liches. So we're pulling Abyss into Delve. We've seen some of the mechanics with fissures in maps, but also when you're doing your node runs, and we want to bring the other 2 liches that are not currently inside Delve into it. We've got the 3 liches that are all going to be the same, but first up I just want to talk about citadels, and it's important because this is an entire sort of rework of like the underground cities sort of system that we have in Delve already. But the idea here is that I think there's a real opportunity to have maybe some like slightly longer form content here. I'm not talking like 45 minutes to an hour, but maybe, you know, it takes 15 minutes or something, or 20 minutes to like essentially a map in of itself, where you find a citadel. They're called abyssal citadels now, and you discover them, and they're kind of like dungeon gameplay. So they're larger zones. As you can see, I've got this kind of map, and you know, there's multiple rooms and there's multiple levels, and there's also multiple ways to find your way through the room. So maybe there's some hidden passages. So we've got like a hidden fast route here on the right hand side, which takes you directly to the boss room and stuff, and you can just look out for fun little kind of ways to explore like that. Maybe there's a mini boss in there, and the idea here is that when you get to the boss room, you're able to interact with the boss room, or maybe some choices that you've made throughout the area that configure that citadel and that boss room specifically to that lich. So they're not preceded. You actually as a player get to decide which lich you want to fight, and again that just gives the player a ton of agency about what content they want to farm, what content they want to encounter, what content they think they're ready for, and maybe what content they need to complete. That will make sense in a second. So the arena will have different mechanics based on the different liches, and it will configure in a different way to summon each of the different liches, whatever one you choose. We'll talk about each of them. We've got Ananamu, Liege of the Lightless. So this fight has a lot of blackout mechanics, is how I imagined it, where the arena changes sort of periodically between light and dark, and there's this like dark infrared kind of mode, you know, this like very negative white and black mode that you have to fight through. And then in this dark mode you have lower resistances and you have to play much more defensively, whereas when you're in the light mode, Ananamu would then be much weaker and you then, you know, could go on the offensive, and it just creates this kind of cadence and different play style that you have to consider. Then you've got Olomun, Sovereign of the Well, and I thought similar here to PoE 1, you could have a sort of timed rage mechanic where you go through different sort of phases and different arenas in each third of his life, and you're trying to basically as quickly as possible kill the phylactery that's like in the center of this sort of, I imagine like the floor goes down every third into like a new level and it gets darker, but you're trying to destroy this phylactery so that you can actually kill him. So a lot of it is going to be about avoiding his attacks, certain situations that come up, and then trying to just burst down this phylactery, kind of like Katava's heart in PoE 1. Then you've got Kurgle the Black-Blooded. Bring back the Abyssal Totems in this fight. You place them around the edge. And then maybe I thought they could work as some kind of like buff-debuff thing, kind of like shrines. So if you need a bit of extra help, you can take a second out of DPS or while you're dodging an attack and activate one of the shrines and it will give you a specific buff. You know, maybe there's like 4 of these that all give different buffs, but at the same time, Kurgle then, you know, in his AI, can then go around and activate these buffs himself as well. And then you have to go over and deactivate that one, which I thought could be a fun little kind of game of like cat and mouse, I guess, of timing these buffs. Right, so most importantly for this section about the liches is their unique rewards. So first off, we'll talk about, you know, item rewards. So I just had an idea, this would need fleshing out, but essentially is you get 3 parts of an amulet, kind of like we do with the Adorned in PoE 1, even though that's a jewel. But yeah, you get parts of this thing and then you can craft it together by selling it to a vendor, for example, or just putting them into your inventory or in your crafting bench, however you wanted to do it. And you get a specific version of a amulet. So there'd be 3 versions of it, one for each of the leeches, and the mods are generally the same, however, except for one. And what I thought would be really cool is if you basically got a skill that was based on one of the liches' skill sets from their arsenal. So each of the liches would have obviously a different skill set, and maybe you have access to one of the skills, and that's what you get from the amulet that could be really powerful. Thought that was fun. But finally, we want to talk about abyssal chisels and what these are. So after a certain depth, whenever you kill a Lich, you're going to get an abyssal chisel. And there's 3 different abyssal chisels. Again, similar thing that you have to combine together into like a proper abyssal chisel. And that is what is going to give you access to the Uber Aul fight. So you're having to fight a series of kind of gateway bosses in order to get that Uber Aul encounter if you want to. And so how do we get to Uber Aul? So obviously we have the standard Aul, the Crystal King. We're all familiar with him. I think just, you know, I'll let GGG imagine how they would bring up that fight, but because I think the fight's kind of cool already, and I imagine they would just go wild with it in PoE 2, which would be fun. But yeah, he is our penultimate boss, right? And the fight will sort of leave up to their imagination. And then we've got Uber Aul the Accursed. So this is the pinnacle content for Delve. This is the, you know, #1 difficult encounter that should be on par with the rest of the pinnacle content in the game. And as new content comes out, maybe this gets improved to be on par with that always in difficulty, so it doesn't just become like a redundant endgame thing. So how do you fight Aul? Okay, so I think this is a really cool way how you access the fight. Let me know what you think about this in the comments, but I think you would take 1 chisel from each of the leeches to create this chisel, right? And then once you defeat the Crystal King, you know, the regular boss fight, so you would just, in any way that you can encounter him, you encounter the Crystal King. After a certain depth, let's say depth 500, there will be this moment where if you have an abyssal chisel in your inventory, he would essentially go down on 1 knee, kind of like we see him here, where you've defeated him. And then you have a choice to either kill him or you can use the abyssal chisel on him. Using the abyssal chisel essentially would crack his crystalline heart and then open up the crystalline core, which is the new boss arena available for this Uber fight. So what I like about this is like it's just an extended phase of the original fight. So you would have to fight him first, get him down on, you know, on 1 knee to marry him, and then you hit him with the abyssal chisel, and you have a choice whether you want to go into the Uber encounter. So this means that you're not wasting fragments if you didn't want to. You don't have to do a whole other chain of events really in order to get the Uber fight or find Uber Aul in this other way. And it just feels like you've then got a choice. It's much more flexible about how and when you want to go into the Uber fight. Finally, for the rewards, which perfectly will segue us onto the next part of the series, what do you get from Uber Aul? Okay, so Resonators are going to be very powerful. We're going to talk about them in part 4, as well as you get some sort of Uber Aul themed chase unique, you know, insert whatever, you know, let me know what you think that should be. I'd be really curious to hear what your thoughts are on that. You can get perfect fossils, which are like the very rare top tier quality versions of fossils. We're gonna have a tiered version of fossils as well. You get Azurite themed item bases, which I thought could be fun. Maybe there's like a couple of item bases that you can only get from this fight, kind of like, I guess, like Grasping Mail or from experimental bases in Heist. But yeah, rare Resonators and then double fractured items. I had this idea that you would be able to essentially get a double fractured item. The only place you could get it in the game would be from Uber Aul, and from killing him, and he will essentially drop 1 guaranteed, potentially more, maybe rarely, but 1 guaranteed double fractured base. Could be completely rubbish, could be absolutely amazing, right, as we know. So that is the bosses sort of part of this series. Part 3, we were just looking at loads of different ideas, but I think importantly you've got the kind of things like the Brood Devourer and the Shatterhulk, which are just fun other encounters that feel impactful and have their own sort of rewards. But then we've got this, you know, the leeches going into Uber Aul, or, you know, Aul and then Uber Aul. There's a storyline there. There's a thing that we can sort of discover through Nico in these forward bases that we talked about in part 1. So yeah, just trying to add a bit more depth and lore and find out, okay, like, you know, maybe you go into the crystalline core in the Uber fight and defeat him, and then you learn, like, you know, okay, what happened to this guy? Like, who is this person? And that's kind of the ultimate, you know, part of the story. All right, I will see you in the next one where we're going to be talking about Resonators, fossils, how we've turned essences into fossils and shaped that, as well as abyssal items. And that is going to conclude this series. So yeah, look forward to part 4. I hope to see you there. Friends, exiles, ta-da.